Greetings, friends. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with a brand new episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon, the show where I sometimes have guests, but I almost always am doing some drawing. I'm drawing uh, cartoon, drawing cartoon homages to classic pieces of D&D and fantasy art, gaming art. Tonight, no guests tonight, just me hanging out, doing a work in progress. As those of you who've watched the show before know, I very often am doing interviews with people from the game industry, and while I do, I start work on those classic homages. And in the first year of the show, I was able to very much keep in up in pace with the drawings I was doing each week. I would begin one on the show, and I'd finish it over the next few days. This year has been a little more stressful overall, and I fell behind. So that's why these work in progress shows have come along, where I take a drawing that I began in a previous episode and has been sitting in its just sketch phase for quite a while, and I bring it up and I do some work on it while we chat. I label these as different because there's a difference in the kind of work I do and the amount of focus I have to give it. For the main shows, when I'm doing the interviews, I am reinterpreting uh, a drawing that's already there, a drawing or a painting that's already there, and I find it relatively easy to carry on an in-depth conversation while I do that. I'm interpreting a drawing that someone else has done, and I'm doing it in a sketch pencil format. But when it comes time to do the actual finished line work, and even more so the coloring work, that requires a little more focus on the drawing, and it makes me less able to listen to what the person I'm talking to is saying and focus on what may be being said in the chat room. Speaking of the chat room, hello, Michael in chat. Good to see you this evening. And so I've made these a separate kind of show. Right? It's still 50 years in the dungeon, but it's work in progress. I'm going to be doing it's more about the work and less about the interview. In order to keep things more entertaining for everyone, because me quietly drawing a little less entertaining than and certainly not less insightful than talking about things. I've had I very often have people come on and join me here, and we chat. We chat lightly while I'm doing the drawing. This week, don't have anyone to chat with while I'm doing it, so it's just going to be me drawing, which is why I'm doing this long, rambling introduction. So, if you're watching live, like Michael and I know several other people are, please do finish. Feel free to put comments in the chat. I'm going to be less attentive than I usually am. I'm going to be less focused on what's going on there, but I'm going to be rambling about something, and if you give me questions to focus on, that's or to ramble on, that'll be helpful, and kind of opens up as a light ask me anything. So that's what's going on today. I'm going to be working on a drawing I began several episodes ago. Um, in fact, I know because of the topic of the drawing exactly when I did this in the first week of August because that was the week that Gen Con, the Gen Con Game Fair, was going on, and I did this drawing purposely to honor that. It is let me just pull it up here on my iPad. Oh, in case you're wondering, I do all my drawing on an iPad Pro with the app Procreate and an Apple Pencil. They are not sponsored. This is not a sponsored mention. This is just the way it is. Those are the tools I use. Pardon me. Anyway, I pulled this up on the Apple iPad. I see here. Yes. So my drawing this week is based on the program cover illustration from this year's Gen Con, which I think is a really gorgeous, gorgeous piece. Um, very Art Nouveau, which is not my usual style. I like Art Nouveau a lot, but it's not a style that is well suited towards or aligns closely with my usual cartoony style. So I found this a joy and a challenge. You can see here. Hi, Dale. I have an echo. Have an echo. Mm-hmm. Don't know what I can do about that. Not Art Deco, Art Nouveau. Did I say Art Deco? That would be a mistake of mine. Art Deco does align with my drawing style. Art Nouveau does not. I hope you don't have an echo, but so one of the things that's happened this week, between the last time I was on here, uh, is that I had a really major computer problem last week, which um, basically took me out of commission. Although the problem, the computer um, hardware part of the problem was very easily fixed. In solving it, I created, and this was with the help of the customer service people. In trying to solve it, I created an even bigger problem for myself, which wound up taking 4 days to completely recover from. So I did not get a lot done in the second half of last week, and even the first part of this week. Hello, Dave Schwartz. Um, Michael says he does not hear an echo on his. Okay, okay. If it's not repeatable everywhere, then there's definitely not anything I can do about it. Bum 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 bum. Yes. So because of that um, problem, I lost a lot of time, which meant I'm behind on a bunch of things. This is one of the reasons why I don't have someone to chat with this week. Uh, the time I usually put into doing prep for this got eaten up in the computer recovery phase. Anyway, I'm going to be working on this homage to the Gen Con cover from this year's Gen Con, which I think is pretty dang gorgeous. So we look here, over here, we can see that there are basically two layers here. I've got the layer with just the elf maiden and the dragon, and I've got the layer with the background frills. I'm going to turn down the background. I want to leave it on so I can see that it's there, but I'm going to drop the opacity so it's going to drop way back as I do my inking on the elf maiden and the dragon. So we're here. We got the. I think we're about where I want to be. I'm not sure about line weight, but we'll see. So yeah, it's been a challenging week. But as I say, when all is said and done, there wasn't. Uh, um, it was pretty much all recoverable. The hardware problem. Well, the hardware problem was also a software problem. It was some kind of glitch got into my system. I work on a Mac, working and uh, Mac Mini, 2018 version of the Mac Mini, which means that it has, because of the way Apple does their support in building out the operating system, there's about a 5 to 7 year window during which any hardware is supported. Well, it's 7 years now since I got this iMac, which shocks me, or this Mac Mini. And that means that it no longer can handle the current operating system that Mac just came out with. Hello, Steve Winter. Um, which was not a problem. All that means, in itself, is not a problem. It does. All that means is that I can't upgrade to the latest Mac OS. I'm now maxed out on my OS, which means that it's time for me to start thinking about getting a new desktop. But they also did an update to the OS that I am using, and it's unclear exactly why, but I started to get a little glitch in that I'm not sure I love her. I've given her a much nosier nose than she has on there. And that was the problem that started all this. I could go into detail. It's the kind of thing that even as a Mac user, I basically barely understand exactly what was going on. It's a lot. I love Mac. I love Mac as an operating system. I love the products. I understand why it's not for everyone. But one of the things I've loved about it is that I can understand enough uh, to troubleshoot most of my problems without really understanding in depth a lot of things. And this was one of those things where I could troubleshoot some of it but didn't really understand the underlying problems. And so I wound up having to go to Apple customer service for help. And the really kind of not so super satisfying part about it is that they saw, we went through it, we found what was going on, and uh, what we had to do to change it. And I asked what it was that caused this to happen, and their answer basically was, sometimes this happens, which is just not very satisfying because it means that there's nothing I can do to prevent it. I think what they were trying to get across is you didn't do anything wrong. Uh, Maybe they literally do mean sometimes this just happens, but I've never seen anything like it before. And anyway, the problem happened. We fixed it. And then I went to a secondary issue I had, since I had them on the line, about trying to maximize what I was getting out of my iCloud online storage. And it was in that effort that everything fell apart and mistakes were made. And the computer was working more or less fine. Everything was back up and running. But we managed to delete 17,000 files that I had in storage, which constituted all of the art I've done, um, all of the work I've done for Viz Media, all the files that I turned over, all the original Word files. Now, I had backups of all the art. At no point was I really worried that I had irrevocably lost everything. There would be things that I would have irrevocably lost, but I I had backups, or so I thought. Turns out I didn't understand completely how that was working. Uh, the whole problem really hinges on my lack of understanding how I was using iCloud and what I had chosen to do. But again, the good news through all of this is that all of the files were recoverable. It just took me 3 full days to recover them because of the interface that I had to use to do it. 3 full days of recovering files. But when it was done, I had everything back to where I wanted it to be, which is where we're at. But it also, I say this all again as an explanation for why this week has been very uh, weird and more than a little stressful for me, and why today's show is not the usual, even the usual for a work in progress show. Let's see what's going on here in the chat. Been watching American Revolution on PBS. I haven't. I heard about it. I told uh, some of my friends who hadn't heard about it uh, and recommended they watch it. But I have not yet gotten to see any of it. Jeff Grubb, friend of the show, Jeff Grubb, was telling us a little bit about it at lunch today. Sounds terrific. Why? Why did the original piece? Why did the Steve Winter says why did the original piece? It's very belle epoque. It's very Art Nouveau. Why did I choose this piece? I chose this piece because it is a Gen Con cover for this most recent Gen Con, and I did this the week of Gen Con. Why did they choose to do it? That beats the hell out of me. But it's a very striking, I think it's a very beautiful cover. And I'm not, off the top of my head, remembering the artists that did it. I looked it up for the show notes, but I had not been previously familiar with this artist's work. So that's why I can't off the top of my head. Oh, who did the original piece? Yeah, again, if someone look at the show notes, because I wrote it in there, and off the top of my head, I do not remember. Um, Certainly worth mentioning. So, yeah, if someone would do me a favor and just look at the show notes or the um, information about this stream on YouTube, it should be in there. I was just talking about Gen Con with a friend of mine who's not a gamer. Yes, I have friends who are not gamers. And kind of trying to describe what Gen Con is. You know, what it is not that hard to explain given today's convention culture. But, what it is historically and what it means, and then in that context, why it is that I haven't been to Gen Con. Uh, I'm not even sure how long it's been, but it's certainly before COVID. I think it's 2017 or 2018 was the last time I was there. It's weird to me. I mean, in trying to particularly trying to describe it to someone who is not a gamer and has uh, no emotional attachment to or involvement with or understanding of Gen Con. Um, Megan Lara, Michael in chat says, thank you for looking that up for me. Megan Lara is the artist of this original piece. Um, Steve says, I went after COVID and got COVID. Well, there's certainly one reason against going is it's in these current years, it is certainly always some kind of super spreader event, whether it's COVID or just a general con crud. It's rare among any of my friends these days to go to Gen Con or any major show and not get sick to some extent. Um, but yeah, I mean, I found it kind of difficult to explain. The combination of Gen Con is the most important convention in tabletop gaming uh, in the U.S. in the Western Hemisphere, I would say, and yet uh, it's not important for me to go there anymore. I don't get a lot out of going other than seeing my friends and other people I know, interacting with fans. But it's not important. It used to be important to my business to be at Gen Con. It was very important. It used to be a show that if you were working in the industry, you just couldn't miss. And it's still, the biggest show in the industry, but it's no longer uh, a must attend for me. Or, uh, as Steve was kind of intimating, for a lot of people who work in the industries, you don't have to be there. There certainly is always a fair bit gained from being there, but it's very expensive to do, which any Gen Con fan could have told you. It's been expensive. So for me, it's just no longer something I have to do at all. But every year, when it's going on, I wish I was there. It's one of those, if teleportation existed, I would teleport in tickets. uh, but flying in and paying for the hotels and everything else that goes along with attending the show, it, it's basically not worth it to me. You know, a lot of that has to do with how much money I'm making and how much money I have to spend on these things. I can afford to go to, I don't know, two or three smaller regional shows for the for what it costs me to go to Gen Con, and I will get more out of it because I'll be a bigger deal to the attendees. I won't just be one of, but it's a lot of big names. I was going to say everyone goes to Gen Con, but that's I was just got finished saying that's not the case. A lot of big name people go to Gen Con, and there's so much going on. You can't possibly see everything that's going on there. Hmm. It's interesting to me in the growth of convention culture in the last 15, 20 years. Um, com- Combined with the growth in um, the internet, social media, e-commerce, how what used to be the purpose of Gen Con, or the if not the purpose, the main purposes of Gen Con have changed so much, and that's why it's not a must go anymore, because it's no longer doing it's no longer important to Gen Con to do the things that are important to me. That's not true. I mean, that's really overstating that. It's no longer. It's not that it's not important. It's no longer the primary function of Gen Con to do the things that are important to me. It still does them, and it's still a great place to go and meet fans and introduce people to your game that they might not heard of. All those things still are going on and are important parts of what happens at Gen Con. They are no longer the primary function of Gen Con, not by a long shot. Yeah, this Art Nouveau style is not my, as I was saying before, not my usual cup of tea. And I'm trying to, I'm looking at what I did here with the sketch, and remember what it was I was trying to capture, to capture in shorthand, in cartoony shorthand. Again, as I said at the beginning of the show, when I'm working on this part of the drawing, it's more difficult, read kind of impossible, for me to focus on keeping up with what's going on in the chat. Which is why I often have guests on, so I can have light, banterish conversation. Let me look up here what's going on. I do more concerts if hotels weren't so expensive. If I had a car, yeah. Well, yes, yeah. It's the costs have really skyrocketed, which in turn are part of why the content of the show has also shifted to create um, events or parts of the event that cannot be had other places. You have to go to Gen Con to have those kinds of experiences. But, as I was saying before, the more that becomes the primary focus of the show, the less it serves my purpose, which is to just have come people play games and spend lots of time playing games and trying new games. But that's a thing that can happen lots of other places. And does. Regional conventions have become really good at that. At serving that function, giving fans that experience. I just came back, relatively recently from going to Gamehole Con, which serves that purpose magnificently. I was just thinking today that I should reach out to Alex Kammer, who runs Gamehole Con, and see if I can get him to come on the show. I think it would be fun to talk to him about the history of the show and what they're doing, and I'm sure that he has some thoughts about this, how Gen Con has changed, what opportunities that opened for a show for what that's the word I'm looking for. what what purposes Gen Con was not serving that that may have helped to inspire him to start Gamehole Con. I think that in my experience, a lot of times shows like that, or none of the events like that in any region or industry, start because some need is not being met and someone sees it. Either they want that experience themselves, or they know that they notice that people that is potential customers are not being served, and so they decide to serve them. Sometimes it's just for the fun of it. Sometimes it's, well, very usually it's a combination of things. But I would be curious to talk to Alex about what the combination of things it was that led to the creation of Gamehole Con and uh, the decisions to grow it. And sometimes that decision is just, wow, it's so popular, we should do it again. And sometimes it's a business opportunity that you didn't think was going to pop up. An opportunity. Why did we go that way? Because the opportunity suddenly was in our laps. This finger I knew was going to be the tough one because it's got to meet up with the thumb here. Also, the fact that in my cartoony way, I'm changing a four-fingered realistic figure to a three-fingered cartoony figure. And then I need to be careful. I talked about this on previous episodes. That when you're working zoomed in like this, it's very tempting to just stay focused on that. But you need to remember that that's not how anyone is ever going to look at it. They're going to look at it like that. They're going to look at it as part of a whole. And I could get in there and work a lot of detail that becomes too much detail. It draws too much attention to itself. Draws attention away from the rest of things in the drawing. All right, let's get back to the hair now. A bit. Wavy hair, a very important part of Art Nouveau design. that I often glance over in my usual drawing. So I've got to be a little more mindful of how the hair is going here in my drawing. All right, well, I've rattled a lot so far about some things that I've been thinking about. Anything going on? Anything you guys want to hear me talk about? Questions you want to pose? Topics you want to broach? Follow up, if you're enjoying what I'm talking about, follow up questions on what I've been talking about. Maybe you put some in there and I haven't looked at the screen yet to see them. Or maybe I'm just now giving you the opportunity. Whew, let's see what's going on here. Michael says that's why I asked about organized play vis-a-vis the internet on the previous show. Yeah, well, certainly it's interesting. I'm sorry, I'm going to finish reading, but that's certainly something to talk about. Uh, how the filigree framing, yeah, integrates with subject matter. Yeah, Art Nouveau. There's a lot of decorative curlicues, and then the frames become their own version of that. It's very, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's a kind of detailed work and uh, detailed geometry that my brain doesn't do especially well. Going, yeah, Page, Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo. I'm going to be there in January, and it looks to be another gaming convention, which is in that same large regional, lots of guests, and fulfilling uh, um, some of the type of experience that Gen Con used to fulfill, but now is so big that it doesn't. Looks like she, well, no, she's gone 5 fingers. You can see here there are 5 fingers on her version of the hand, and only 4 fingers on mine. Or 3 fingers and a thumb. She's 4 fingers and a thumb. If I were to do it her way, I would need to put that other finger back here. Come on, why are you not doing that? I see. All right. I would need a finger back here. You can see on her drawing supporting the staff. But I'm only going with the 3 fingers. ElfQuest style, I guess. If you are an ElfQuest fan, a friend of Wendy Peeney and her elves, who are intentionally 4 fingered. Remember seeing you guys know who Fred Hembeck is? He was a cartoonist who did. Uh, he's still around, but he was very famous in the 80s, 70s and 80s in particular, for doing comics about the comic industry. And he did one about ElfQuest and drew the elves with 5 fingers. And Wendy Peeney did a kind of reply cartoon. It was kind of a thank you to him for mentioning their at that point new and not particularly well known independent comic. But she had her characters kind of jumping on Hembeck saying, 4 fingers, look, 4, count them. It was pretty funny. All right, she's looking. Oh, let's zoom out she's looking the way I want her to look. Let's move over to the dragon. Is Stan going solo in this episode? S. David Shepard? Yes, Stan is. Stan does not have a guest this episode. I don't think that the audio seems to be normal on my end. Let me just double check one thing on my end. Yeah, audio is normal here. So, I don't know if it's sounding low to you. Maybe I need to speak up a little. ElfQuest was great. I was a huge ElfQuest fan. To say was like I'm no longer. I am a huge ElfQuest fan. Um, but I got into ElfQuest very relatively early in the series, before the first collected volume was done. So I was in that first um, first round of people who discovered it after the Hembeck thing. I mean, I hadn't seen the Hembeck cartoon about it, but it was after ElfQuest was starting to make a splash. So I wasn't one of the people who could say I was there from the beginning. Um, but I did start early enough that I think it was the fourth or fifth uh, comic that was it was an oversized magazine or a magazine sized independent comic, and it was the fourth or fifth issue when I bought it, and I was able to get all of the back issues. They were not they had not sold through. They had not. When I found, well, really, what it was when I found a store that had any of them, they had all of them because they'd ordered them, and not a lot of people were buying them. It was about the same time, just a little bit after, but about the same time that I first discovered Cerebus, the aardvark, which was around issue 20 of that, late teens or early 20s. So remember starting to buy both of those about the same time. It's about the time my taste in comics was beginning to shift more towards independent than the big two. Although I still had a number of years where I was mostly reading Marvel with a smattering of DC. Um, but the more and more as the years went on, my taste ran into the independent comics, the small press comics. It was a fascinating time. It was an awesome time to be a comics fan. The volume issue was between the keyboard and the chair. All right, well, maybe you can get IT to come out and give you a hand with that. The first one was, yeah, it was after the black and white issues, Michael. Yes, the first time, I think it was just issue one that they did in black and white for ElfQuest. Um, and uh, and then they reset and did it again in color. It was not the black and white that I got, but it was the first edition, the first run in color. I never did find one of the black. I would have loved to have bought one of those. I mean, I was a collector even then, right? That, in fact, was the heyday of my collecting. Uh, and I would have loved to have gotten the black and white version to go along with it. But no, I was getting color the color magazines. I think that the black and white one was not an it was not magazine sized either. That was more comic book sized. Again, not having seen one, I don't know that for sure. That's my understanding. If you know better, please enlighten me. I am still, as I say, still an ElfQuest fan, although I stopped following it after a while. I did not love the what they were doing with the storyline after they wrapped up that first gigantic story. Um, I stopped buying ElfQuest entirely for a long time, but I lost. They did the last ElfQuest story as a series about 8 years ago, maybe as much as 10. I don't know. Wow, could it be 10 years already? So I bought that and I read that and I liked it fine, but I mean, when it came out, ElfQuest was so unlike what had been done by anyone else in so many different ways between the art and the kind of story they were telling and the kind of fantasy world they were building. I It really captured uh, my heart and imagination. But once they finished telling that first main storyline, uh, it's I was ready to move along. I didn't need to keep living in that world. I was not as intrigued by the upkeep, if you will, on the ElfQuest world as I was in the discovery of it and its first major storyline. I don't want to take anything away from it. It's not like one of those times. It's not those times when you see fans say that's when it got bad. I'm not saying it got bad. I'm saying I had it and it was time for me to go read something else. And so I did. In fact, lots of something else's. It's looking pretty good. Let's see what's going on here. Like it says, yeah, oh, the local library had all the collections. Yeah, that would be great. let's see, let's see. We got to meet Richard and Wendy on a couple of occasions. They were based out of Poughkeepsie, New York, which is New York State's a strange state for anyone that doesn't come from the relative region. It's hard to understand. We talk about downs. You hear people say upstate New York. Upstate New York is is a weird uh, descriptor because that's kind of uh, defined by the people from the greater New York metro area, which is where I'm from. The New York City and Long Island and the commuting suburbs, which is very much the lowest, the most southern part of the state, the most downstate part of the state. Um, but it's also for all the fact that it's so many people, so many people. It's a relatively small uh, geographic part of what is New York State. New York State's really big. Um, like if you were to start out at the eastern end of Long Island, it's a 10 to 12 hour drive to drive the longest route across all of New York State. It's a big place. It's not Texas big, not California big, but it's big. And so what's kind of just referred to as upstate New York, when people talk about upstate New York, they're talking about most of the state geographically. It starts just north of New York City. Of Wow, that was a terrible way to say that. It starts just north of NYC, and and then it goes north, and it goes northwest, and it goes west northwest. It's a big area, and it's got its own series of regionalisms within it, but it's all kind of jumbled up into upstate New York. In any case, I'm saying that because Wendy and Richard Peeney were in what's called upstate New York. Poughkeepsie's relatively close. It's only about an hour and a half from New York, from downtown Manhattan. Um, and I was also in upstate New York. I was in Binghamton, which is 4 hours from Manhattan, or 3.5 anyway, and a good 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours from Poughkeepsie, with another 2 to 3 hours of New York left to drive if you wanted to get to the farthest parts of the state. 2.5 hours to Buffalo and the Niagara Falls area. So that's saying it would be truthful to say that both the Peenies and I were living in upstate New York at the time that ElfQuest was being created, but we were not living anywhere near each other. But it being regional, I did see them I got to meet them at a couple of regional cons. Nice folks, strange folks, nice folks. Say the same thing about me, I'm sure. Well, no, I'm sure they don't remember me. At the time, I was just another fan, and not a particularly remarkable one. All right, you know what? I'm going to turn off both layers of pencils and just look at these inks and see. You want to get a feeling with these of the line weight, particularly on the outermost parts, particularly on the silhouette, is what I probably should have said. The line weight being relatively even. So I do this and I look for areas where, like here with the flowers, just gets a little too delicate. And because I'd done these zoomed in and wasn't thinking about the image as a whole, that same problem I was talking about earlier, you got to remember that everything you're drawing needs to serve the final version of the drawing as a whole. Like that there. That's looking good. Is there a mainland? I look at it as mainland New York. That's a good way to look at it. It's the bulk of New York, and it's the landlocked part of New York. Although the Hudson River runs right up the um, eastern side. Here's a weird tangent. I often talk about tangents, and see here how this this line here on the interior of the horn meets up with this line here, which is the exterior curve of the fin of the back fins, and it creates a weird tangent. So I want to move that so they don't meet up like that. Same thing on the other side. This kind of things crop in there very often because you know what you're drawing. It's only you need to stop and look at it with the eyes of someone who doesn't know what you're drawing, of what your audience is, someone who's just coming to observe it. There we go. I think that we could use a little. Now, some of these details will certainly come in the coloring, but I like I like to have a line drawing that stands on its own. Particularly as we've talked about before, since I can and may well use these in coloring book format. In which case they have to stand alone just as a line drawing. There we go. All right. So turn those coloring areas back on. And how long have we been going here? An hour already. All right. That's actually pretty good for an hour. All right. So this is going to be one layer, and it's going to be the topmost layer. Now it's a little strange or a little weird. So it's going to lay over the top, or I'm going to put the framing device underneath it. But you see, some areas it definitely goes over it, and other areas where, like here, where although these lines sit on top, the image needs to feel like these lines are binding it, right? So if this was just a circle, it would be the frame over the top of it. But these interact. Parts of it are above it, parts of it are below it. Um, so I may, in the end, have to come back and be do a little bit of extra fiddling with these lines here and the colors when I wind up coloring it, just to make everything work together. But for now, let's come back here and we'll turn the opacity back up on the second layer, because that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to turn off the inks I've already done and maybe drop the opacity a bit on those pencils, and now I'm going to do a whole new layer with all this other stuff in it. That's going to be part 2. Take a stretch break, stretch and stretch and stretch. You know, this is the part of the show, if I had a sponsor, I'd throw in a tip out to my sponsor. If you want to be that sponsor, contact me. We can make it happen. Yeah. All right, so looking at this, I remember when I was doing this pencils on this. Uh, this is where part of that Art Nouveau thing just becomes complicated, right? It needs to, each of these, like this oval, the main oval, has to have a pleasingly oval shape, but these circles have to be, actual circles, uh, and it all has to fit together. It's tricky. Like I have a lot of respect for people that work this way, for that work in this style. Megan Lara, who Michael did me the favor of looking up her name, and now I can't find it again. I believe that was it. Uh, yes, Megan Lara. Beautiful, beautiful Art Nouveau stuff. There's so much detail, so much thought and beautiful design work that goes into doing that. But I don't know if you, I don't know if I actually, I'm not even sure if I did this on the screen. I might have done this part of it separately, but you got to. So in order to get these lines right, I've got to draw them as a whole. Didn't quite get that curve right. All right. It's tricky. Yeah, I'm very lucky. Again, this is another one of those things that this program makes easier and even possible. Uh, because I just have to get roughly the shape I want, and then it snaps it into a perfect uh, ellipsis for me. What I'm not sure is if I want to go back by hand. Another thing I can do is just duplicate this layer, grab it, and enlarge it. That's getting very fiddly for me. I guess I don't want to do that. There's probably a way to do that that would make me happy. But I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Hmm. Tell you what, I've just realized one thing. I'm going to clear this layer entirely. So I want to make my line weight lighter. I'm using that same weight that I drew this with when I want the lines here to be thinner. Maybe much thinner. Particularly for the the filigree. That's too thin. Again, here all I have to do is get close to the line I want it to be, because when I complete it, the app will snap it into a regular ellipse. All right, now if I turn things off, I can see that that's about the, see the difference in line weight between those? That's what I want. But I may still have to come in and darken, particularly around her head, make those lines just a little heavier. But I don't need to worry about that right now. Like I says, my other caster friend, Corey, frames all of his pieces with Art Nouveau filigree framings. He uses a symmetry tool to create. Yeah, yes. The symmetry tool is a lot of fun. If you remember playing with Spirograph as a kid, it's got a lot of the same fun aspects. And you can just do it freehand and just play around. But it's the kind of thing you do. You need to play around with that to get good at it. And I am not. I bet your friend Corey, not just in this program, but lots of other programs, has spent a lot of time playing around with that, and that's a skill on its own. I have a spirograph sitting on my shelf right in front of you, says Michael. Yeah, well, some games are classic for a reason. Okay, now these spirals are a little different in that because it's a growing curve, I can't let it automatically snap. It's not a single curve, really, is what's happening there. It's changing as it goes. That's how I'm creating a curlicue. Instead, if it's a single curve, it would just create a circle. Sorry, no talking. I have to concentrate on the seat. Concentrate to get this right. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. How when I'm doing this kind of work, sometimes it just requires me to concentrate so much that I stop being a good streaming host. All right, let's turn it off and look at that. It's looking pretty good. Again, line weight. I really want the line weight to be even on these, so I've got to come back and add a little in here, a little in there. There we go. That looks kind of nice. Let's do it again. I suppose. Thinking about other ways I could do this. To do these on separate layers would also be a way to allow myself to try different things without worrying about interfering with or messing with what's already there. And then later on, I could join them back into. Join them up back into one. Nope, again, I can't because I'm creating a spiral. I can't, I have to do this on my own. I cannot let the automatic function take over, which just makes it a little more difficult. But worth it, I think. That's the hope that in the end it will have been worth it. So David says, like the look of my elf, she looks a little more like she's done anime style, slightly bigger eyes. Yes, well, that's another part of doing these homages is finding places where I'm letting my style supersede what the original artist did. Because in the end, I'm not trying to flat out make a recreation that is indistinguishable. I'm trying to do honor to what I think is a very great, beautiful piece of art, but doing it in my style. So yes, she definitely, compared to this elf lady who has a very um, realistic. If we get rid of the ears, that looks like women do in Art Nouveau drawings, French drawings from the late 19th century or 20 late 18th century. But she's got ears. Mine looks like elf ladies look in stand drawings a little. I mean, certainly I don't. uh, but then we get details like how the ears are going or things like that, that I'm, rather than going completely with my style, I'm uh, I'm doing my my interpretation of their style. All right, I remember. In order to do this part right, I've got to draw even more. I've already erased a bunch here, but I need to get that whole curve. And then erase a bunch of it. That, talking before, I'm going back to the ElfQuest talk. Uh, that was when I was talking about the Hembeck cartoon, right? That was Hembeck's homage to, uh, rather than a particular piece, to the ElfQuest comic. He drew them in his style. So it's a tricky thing sometimes. You want it to be recognizable as the thing you are honoring, but also recognizable as your drawing. There are some characters that are easier to do that with, and some things like an ElfQuest or like an Art Nouveau painting that uh, it's harder to find the spot or the style that meshes the two. If you go back and look at the drawings I've done in this for this show in this larger series, you'll see that some of just from the perspective of what we're talking about, some of the drawings I've done are more clearly look like, even if you weren't familiar with the piece, you would say, "Oh, well, that looks like the when I do an homage to Larry Elmore, the characters, the in the drawing look like." Um, it's clear that they're based on Elmore characters. Uh, there's something about his style that I'm able to capture, make a little bit my own, but still clearly evoke Elmore's original style. Whereas I think that in a lot of the Jeff Easley ones that I did, it's a little harder to see Jeff's style in my homage to Jeff. I don't capture it quite as completely. There's a part of it that just doesn't come through as cleanly. All right, again, I can clean these up a little bit. Get the line weight right. some places the curve is not right. Like so. All right, 2 down, 1 to go. Yeah, it probably would have made it easier on myself if I'd done these on separate layers and then merged them. Oh well. Let's say that would have been easier. Every solution, or in most cases, a solution for one thing causes a challenge in another thing. Oh yeah, again, because it's not a single curve, can't let the auto function take over. Nope. That seems about right. Let's start erasing and then try it again. Hello, Linnea. Glad you could join in. having spent all of this time getting these circles right, you can bet that when it comes to drawing what's inside them, that's going to get its own layer. These this filigree frame circle is going to be its own layer. Whereas in the pencils, you see that the drawing, the drawings and the frame are all in one. Although they're different. Turn on the layers again. They're different colors, right? The purple and the green, but it's all one layer. For the finished piece, they're going to be different layers. So I don't have to fret over um, over messing up this frame that I'm so meticulously putting together. Anything else you guys want to talk about? I'll look up in a second to see if there's anything in the chat. Or if you're happy just listening to me muse as I do my sketching, I'm happy to do that too. So one of the things, what you can't see really, since you don't see where I'm placing my brush, and every time I make a different stroke. A lot of these things I'm doing right now, you can tell I'm doing lots of quick little erasures there. But when it came to getting the line right here, has to be a single long stroke. Otherwise, it's going to look choppy. And when I get to the anywhere where I'm at the final outside thing, the last stroke is always a long stroke, so that you create um, a line that's not short and choppy. Doesn't show those telltale signs. Oh, we're getting close. Oh, we're getting close. Nope. 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 There. Okay, let's turn that sketch off and look at it just as a line again. And that is our framing line. Hey, Chris Andrew. Michael in chat says, not to toot my own horn, but I see who won. You know what? No, I know they announced the coloring contest winners today. Michael, did you win the coloring contest? For those of you who don't know, uh, our friends at Cobalt Press were having a coloring contest to celebrate the launch of their new uh, um, cozy TTRPG Riverbank, written by my friend and colleague uh, Kish Johnson, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I did a cartoon homage to that in a previous episode. Let's go look at that right now, since we're talking about it. Here we go. No, not that. Goodness, no. That. Here. Yes, it's a cartoon homage to the cover of um, Riverbank. And the our friends at Co-op Press liked it so much that they asked me if they could use it for promotional purposes, not the least of which is, if I come over here to a different file, where is that file? I have things sorted and I still can't find it. Here we go. That is a coloring book version of my drawing, my interpretation of the cover for Riverbank. And they did a coloring contest of that, which just wrapped up. And Michael, among other people, I talked about it here in previous weeks. Michael participated, and it sounds like he might have been one of the 3 winners, which is awesome. Congratulations. Definitely have to go and check that out. Over on the koboldpress.com blog. koboldpress.com/blog. Well, look how fancy those lines are. For those of you who missed the first part of it, I've already done that part of the inking. And now we've got the frames part of the inking done. I think now I want to come in here and come back to our elf maiden, and no, just put a little extra line weight here so that it stands out next to the framing circles. I think the framing circles are going to end up being black. I'll probably change the color on that line work to maybe a gold. That's a decision I can make during the coloring process, though. Yeah, but as I said before, we see where these parts line up. I can see now that I definitely need to extend those out a little more. Make sure these meet, because when all is said and done, the elf and the dragon are going to be floating over that the line drawing beneath it, and those lines have to look like it has to create the illusion that they are bound underneath it. Now I'm looking here again for tangents, unintended tangents. Here's one. I want to decide whether I want right here the cheek. I'm going to change to red. Right here, the cheek and the frame kind of touch. I either want to pull that cheek back or make sure that it crosses boldly over, but not have that unintended tangent. These are intended tangents, where the two lines run right up to each other and stop. Hair here. We want it to go over, clearly over. Maybe I'll get rid of this entirely and draw it again. Here, similar thing. Make sure the end of this hair doesn't just sync up with that, but goes over it clearly. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Michael says, I wasn't entering to win really, but I got third place after left list. Well, I hope that the people who are participating in that kind of thing are not entering it to win, right? The point of a coloring contest is to have fun and to share your stuff. And kind of, for me, part of what doing these shows, it's fun to share my process with everyone. Yes, I'm trying to win you over, win your hearts and minds, get you to become super Stan fans. But I started doing this kind of thing because of the fun of sharing, and that's what coloring contests are about. It's nice to win. I mean, it's always nice to win, and congratulations to you for doing it. But yeah, no, I had no illusion that you were in it in a competitive way. But it's fantastic that you won third place. That's great. Hello, Penny Firehorse. How you doing this evening? Haven't seen you in a while because one or both of us have missed a lot of those Monday Fandango meetings. One week it's you, another week it's me, some week it's both of us. It's been a busy time. Now, let me see something here. If I turn this back on, there are definitely places where I made a mistake. I made a mistake. Because um, if I turn this off for a second, you can see where I kept I kept this when I really wanted to get rid of that and keep the circle so that we can see the whole inside. So I need to put those lines back in. And erase the inside part. I did that on all three of these circles. Just wasn't really paying attention. Thankfully, it's not that hard to correct. Same thing here. This is, I guess, the part of the show where I say, look, everyone makes mistakes. Happens to the best of us and the worst of us. And like me, those of us who are somewhere in the middle. Same thing up top. Penny Firehorse, for those of you who don't know, our visitor, is another local Seattle area artist, Tacoma, Seattle area artist, who's just had some stuff that's been accepted into some really great shows. Penny, do you have any links to your work that we can share to people? I like to help promote folks when I can. I like to promote my friends even more. There we go. Now, now those are finished. Chris says, "Look, I'm all for coloring, but connect the dots. That's where it's at. That's where you draw the line. That's where you draw the line." Why did I not know immediately that that was going to be a pun and not just a humorous comment? Should have known. All right, so now if I turn back on that top layer, we can see that's how far we've come in this homage so far in the lines. Time to come back and do some more drawing. That's going to be another layer, though. Let's turn off our maiden and dragon again. Come back and again have a thinner line weight because okay. I was worried about this little tick up in the corner. If I'd zoomed in, I would have seen it was purple and known everything was all right. But I want the line weight on these drawings to be even finer than the line weight on the frame. So let's have a look here and come in and do some drawing. Again, it's this matter of remembering that while I'm zoomed in, I have to only put the lines that are going to read well when it's zoomed out. Definitely one of the challenges in working digitally. There's so many advantages, but always challenges, and one of them is certainly that, and it's that you need to remember that although you can zoom in, what you draw has to serve the finished piece that everyone can see when you zoom out. It does you no good to add in super duper amounts of detail that look great zoomed in, but are just a muddled mess when you zoom out to look at it full size. Here's a good example, right, with the leaves. My inclination when drawing uh, shrubbery or trees or leafery like this is to get a good tight curl so it looks like you can see a bunch of leaves. But when we zoom out and look at it, if I put that many little curlicues on there, it's going to look like a real mess. So I'm purposely not. I'm fighting my inclinations. Oh, we don't want to see that. Spam. Done with that. Suppose it's nice to have, in most cases, it's good to have my iPad and phone connected like that. But when I'm live streaming, it can be inconvenient. Let's see. Chris Andrew says, I love this style of art with the various illustrations in the circles. Bob Ross did a few paintings like this. Yes, this is certainly an aspect of many Art Nouveau pieces that the filigrees, the finery will have um, their own little vignettes contained within them. please share the linky. Oh yeah, no, Penny, Penny, share some links. Penny, share some links. Show people your stuff. Linnea wants to see. She doesn't say that for just anyone. Penny does really, really awesome. Not just uh, painting and illustration, but ceramics and uh, painting on glass and bottles and things like that. One of our terrific local artists here in the greater Pacific Northwest. I was going to say Seattle area again, but I need to not do that. It's not all about Seattle. I don't even live in Seattle. What do I care? Why should I be promoting them? I live in Kent. But as I mentioned a little earlier, Penny is part of a group I meet with in Tacoma. I also go to Tacoma quite a bit. A city that it's one of those cities that uh, it's it's funny to poke fun at. Tacoma is a really awesome little city. Hmm. Already right there, created a tangent I didn't want. Seattle has Starbucks and D&D. Well, you know what? Actually, if you're gonna go from like the way I was talking, Seattle doesn't have D&D. That's Renton. Yes, Starbucks definitely Seattle, a Seattle company. But Wizards of the Coast is not and never has been in Seattle proper. It's I'm sure wherever you are, you certainly have a version of, well, we say Seattle because that's the only thing people are likely to know. But anyone local would say that's not Seattle. I'm sure I know that in Pittsburgh there are a bunch of adjacent towns and cities that have that issue. I certainly in the New York City area, a number of times say, well, I'm from New York City. Not actually true, but it's the easiest way to be understood. But since I was already cutting um, that particular point finer, it's worth saying that, yeah, Seattle, not where D&D is. There we go. One drawing down. Let's go on to the next. And you see that one of the things that, if we look at it, in doing any of my homages, I uh, focus on certain details. First of all, I do these as uh, square frames, square canvases, and as you can see, it's based on a rectangular canvas. So I already adapt in that way. But I always pick things I'm going to focus on. Very often, pick things I'm going to leave out. Then, if we look here, we've got this little book with a rose, very beautiful. But that's as a decorative element that's there for putting in the Gen Con information, the 2025 Indianapolis. I also left out the shield in the corner, which is also very nice, but again, uh, as a square, in order to focus on the maiden and the dragon's snout is eating up that area. And if I were to put this detail under the dragon, most of it would be hidden, and it would create one of those situations I was just talking about before, where uh, you create details that that are distracting and don't help your image. So it's gone. You know what? No, you don't. You don't know what. But I'm going to. I have to step away for a second. Well, a second. I have to step away for probably 30 seconds to a minute. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just put that up to take up the screen, and I will be back momentarily. What am I going to do here? I'm going to mute this because not anymore. I'm not. You can hear me now? Yes? I thought I hit that. Anyway, yes. Thank you, Chris, for grabbing the hosting reins. What I said when I immediately sat down was sometimes when you're the only person at home or in the office, you're the person that has to deal with things. Uh, Again, as I was saying before, it would be my personal preference usually to put a little more detail into these leaves, but I need to bear in mind that this is for a very small part of a larger piece, and they need to look good. When viewed at that scale, not this one. Michael was talking about the coloring uh, thing he was just doing based on the uh, riverbank piece, and saying that there were a lot of in doing the coloring, he had to look at it and figure out what some of the lines and little half drawn items were and what they were connected to so that he could color them correctly. I'm sure that was a bit of a challenge. It's one of those things that uh, um, comes up for me a lot when doing these drawings. I notice details as I try and figure out what to do. I notice details about the drawing that I'd never seen before, even drawings I've known for years. Paintings and book covers for things that have been personal favorites of mine. When I was doing the one I just did last week, I was working on last week, the Denny Bouveau painting for the Dragon Magazine cover, Dragon Magazine number 86. Uh, I I've loved that drawing since I first encountered it 40 plus years ago. But I didn't notice until I was working on it that the gigantic skull in the background. I was so focused on what was going on in the foreground, I never noticed at all that death's head, that haunting skull, was in the drawing. And I was talking to several other friends, some of whom worked at uh, TSR and Wizards at the time, and several of them said they'd never noticed that either. So there's a there for me is one of the little bits of magic of doing this project and doing these homages is it helps me to even better understand these pieces that I've loved. In trying to do a drawing myself to honor them, I learn more about the original. Let's see what's going on here. Sometimes things in art are Easter eggs. Yeah. Sometimes you drop in. The artist certainly will drop in things that you are meant to find, or that are extras that you are rewarded for finding. And sometimes they're just abbreviations that, like so much of what I talk about, you want the your viewer to accept without questioning, um, because they help create an image without needing the 100% detail. Uh, an Easter egg almost always will have a larger amount of detail because once you see it, you're supposed to be able to figure out something extra from it. All right, let's turn off that. See how that looks. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. We want to put, there we go. Yep, yep, yep. One more little corner. And we may have, all right, so here's another one. Oh, those two right now, layers wise, are below the frame. But because I want the beholder's tongue, or the mimic's tongue, to pop out over the frame, I have a choice, right? I can do it anywhere you've got this interaction. You've got a choice of what are you going to put in front or behind things. So with um, our elf maiden and dragon, despite the fact they're supposed to mostly be inside the frame, I put them over the frame, and I'm going to fudge the fact that they look like they're in the frame. With these other two drawings, because they are within the frame, I put them on a layer below the frame, which will make it easier coloring wise. I can overrun the lines a little and the frame will cover it. But with our mimic here, we want him to, or it, to appear to be in the frame. But I think, like the elf and the dragon, the important part is that he's over it. So I'm actually going to do a third layer, or a fourth layer, which is over the hmm. I stopped because I had a second thought. Um, I think I'm going to put it on the same layer with the dragon and the maiden, so that it will float over the frame. I was going to give it its own layer, but I realized that it doesn't need it. It can live, if I turn off the frame now entirely, it it can live on this layer with the dragon and the elf. It won't interfere with the thing, and it will, like them, appear to be inside uh, the frame for the most part, but be popping above it where it's important. Michael says Corey just erases the filigree that is overlapped. That's certainly a way to do it, and certainly the way you have to do it if you're working in traditional media. But I'm not. Okay. Again, these are the part of the advantages of working in digital media. Now, even I do some things, even though I'm working digitally, I do some things the same way I would in physical because I like working that way. I have a long history of doing it. I taught myself how to do things a certain way, and I want to keep doing them that way, even though there's a digital way to do them different or better. And I think that the erasing the filigree, as you're talking about there, that your friend Corey does uh, fits into that category. In many cases, you don't have to if you're working digitally, but if you want to have a certain effect or you like doing it that way, maybe it gives you there's there are some times that doing it the imperfect physical media way just gives you a different result. There are parts of what I do that, particularly in coloring, that I do similar things. I do things that I don't need to, uh, because I like the subtle difference in that effect. I think most people probably wouldn't even notice. Even most professionals might not notice. But I notice and I like the difference. And I like doing it the way that I'm comfortable doing it. Old man shakes fists at clouds. Old man shakes fist at digital clouds. Or should I say, old cartoonist shakes fists at digital clouds. But, like your friend Corey, I'm just doing the same thing. I'm erasing these parts of the tongue where the teeth are going to go. I am a mystery. A yummy chocolate mystery. Mm-mm. Be careful about the tangent there. now, if I turn off that, turn on that, and we can see that is what our line drawing looks like for the drawing. Ooh, what's going on in the chat? What's going on in the chat? Nothing worth me reading out loud, but amusing. I would love to just hang around and chat. Um, all right, so this is what it looks like. I'm not going to do coloring, as so often is the case. Uh, Having already spent 2.5 hours drawing tonight here with you guys, I'm going to leave it at this. Uh, Looking pretty good. Let me pull back on there so we can see the reference. So done a good job putting together the line drawings. And if I just did a little bit of layering and dropping in some whites so that where things cover up, I could create a coloring book version of this too. I might. That's what I did uh, um, for the riverbank coloring book. Same kind of thing here, where different layers were overlapping each other. So what I do is create a solid white to block where color will eventually do that job, and that creates the whole thing. So if I were to put some white behind the orb and the horns of the dragon and parts of the hair and things like that, we could create a coloring page version of this drawing, which might be fun to color. And maybe one day I will. That day is not today. But there we go. That is a drawing. That's a lines layer. Next, I'm going to take it offline and continue to work on it. And if you want to be among the first people to get to see it when it's done, that's a pause for dramatic tension. You should subscribe to the 50 Years in the Dungeon.substack.com newsletter, where I always put these things out immediately. The previous one, which I worked on last week, is completed. It's done, and the finished version has been released to people who subscribe to the newsletter already. So yeah, you could be looking at it right now. I bet most of the people who are in the live chat right now are subscribed because they're good folk. So I'm sure they've already seen it. Michael says you've done the Art Nouveau movement proud. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sure I won't be joining their ranks on a regular basis, but it's good to know I can dance with the crowd if I want to. I can dance if I want to. I can leave my friends behind. Yes, 50 Years in the Dungeon.substack.com, and you will get to see these pieces as soon as they're done and before anyone else gets to see them. I think it's going to be next week sometime, maybe with Thanksgiving, maybe even the week after, before I let the finished version of that Dragon magazine cover out upon the world. Also, if you are a paying subscriber, you can. There's not a lot. I'm going to be honest. There's not a lot you get for being a paid subscriber, except that you support the show and me. That's something. But there's not a lot of rewards for it. But if you want to see more show, that's one of the ways to encourage it. Money talks. Uh, but there are a few things. And one of the things that paid subscribers get are uh, process videos, which is because I'm working in Procreate, it saves each move I make, and I can uh, create a video. You know what? Let's show you one of the videos. It'll be fun. Let's show you this one we were just working on. I'll come back here, and I can come over here in the Procreate app, and there's a video, and let's watch a time lapse, and it shows you all the things I did, and you watch the piece come together like that. This is probably gonna be a 3-minute video. I don't know how long. I'll talk for a bit and probably stop it in the middle. But yeah, and so when I finish each piece, I I download this and speed it up a little. I increase it to in speed, so the whole thing takes about a minute to see it go from nothing to finished piece. This has its own timing, as I say. I'm looking at this and I'm guessing that it's going to be 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, so these are fun. I mean, I enjoy watching them. I know that I love watching other artists do their process videos where they show it. And yeah. These are just it's like magic. I drew those lines and I still find it entertaining. Yeah. So there we go. That's enough of that. Let's say that's just one of the little rewards you get for being a member of the newsletter. Also, if you really like what I do and you want to be more involved, you can join my Patreon community, patreon.com/Stanex. And I know Linnea is a member there. I think Michael might be too. And that's lots of different things I do. I do posts of all different kinds of stuff so that you feel more involved in what I'm doing. And I make sure that you get to see things other people don't get to see. There are also free versions of that. But of course, Patreon being the patron part of Patreon, is the goal is to help to support what I'm doing, to invest in what I'm doing, and to help to encourage more of what I'm doing. So it's been a fun night. Had a good time. I will be back tomorrow. Last week I had to skip random encounters because of that computer problem I was talking about at the beginning of the show. Everything fell apart, and I was not able to stream. So we're going to stream the episode that I thought, with the encounter tables I thought I was going to use last week, we're going to use this week. So come back tomorrow, same time, same place, and you can join me for an episode of Random Encounters. Until then, take care.